Hi, and welcome to Crafting a Smash Switch Roster. Wait, no, I know what you're thinking. Everyone does these, but this one's going to be different. It's going to have statistics. Wait, no, I swear it's going to be fun. Stick around. So a lot of people make, top 10 videos or videos they think will come in and blah, 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 and they're fun, and I watch them. But no one really goes into the nitty-gritty and really compares statistics from each game to game, like how many clones are introduced or what kind of characters are cut or how many are cut, or, even how many franchises are introduced and yada, yada, yada. So those are the kind of things I was really interested in looking into and that we're going to go through today. And yeah, it's going to be fun. If you haven't noticed, this is going to be a bit more laid-back video. I still have tons of points. I got 13 pages and 5,000 words. I don't know why I'm showing that off like I'm David Cage. It's not even a script. It's just notes. But it is a lot of notes. But yeah, I don't know. I just want to try a video where I'm more relaxed instead of just reading off a script and kind of, acting. I guess you could call that acting. I guess I wanted to do something that wasn't just reading off a script and be more natural. So I'm going to try this out and see how it works. All the information, or at least most of it from my recollection, are from Source Gaming, which I'll list the articles in the description of the comments. I do technically do some work for them. I'm not paid to, promote this. I'm definitely not even big enough for that to even be a thing. But it's just because they're the best at this, honestly. They're the ones who actually translate all of Sakurai's Famitsu articles. So any information you hear about Smash Brothers from Sakurai, it's definitely from them. So credit where credit's due. There are some rules to go through, but first let's go through Sakurai's criteria for at least first-party characters, because third-party is kind of a separate thing. So just to give you an idea how characters I choose and whatnot will be going through this kind of filter. So out of the 4, he has personality, something that only that character can do, development issues, and distribution among the franchise. So one example was he didn't want to introduce Wario in Melee because he felt he already introduced enough Mario characters, so that's why he kind of held back. So those are his criteria for choosing first-party characters. Rules! So the first one being, I see this as a brand new game. Based on the timeline of Sakurai's statements from Source Gaming's actual video discussion that I'll link somewhere. Basically, DLC finished in January or February. He took a break, assuming a month for good measure, and then started his next game, which was already planned, which obviously we now know as Smash Brothers. So estimating about March 2016 to November 2018 would be over 2.5 years. That's a little bit longer than the usual length of a Smash game. So I don't see how they would spend the same amount or more and somehow just be barely more than a port. So I'm just treating this as a full new game. That's also going to make things a little bit easier. But I think they've had enough time that even if it started off as a port, they would have evolved it into a new game anyway. At least for the character's sake. Who knows about the content and whatnot. But the next one, I will show stats about the DLC characters, but this is just going to be a prediction for the base roster. It just makes things a lot easier, but DLC is still new, so it only makes sense to compare the other rosters based on how they were as well. I'm also going to be a bit bold and say I don't think DLC characters are returning. They seem like they could always be flimsy, like, oh, well, they're extra content, so we don't technically have to bring them back. Is kind of one and done deal. The only character I would give exception to is Bayonetta, because Bayonetta 3 is coming out and Nintendo's funding that. So, sorry, Mike, you're going to have to deal with Bayonetta again, most likely. That's the only one I'm going to say is probably going to return. So, cut those characters. Next, I treat Toon Link as a reskinned Young Link. So, for example, I don't count Young Link as being cut. He just got a facelift. Stay off the Botox. They're basically identical minus fire arrows for Young Link, and I think Toon Link has the Hurricane Spin, except that it's still just in place. It doesn't actually move anywhere like in Wind Waker. Next, transformation characters are counted individually. So Zelda and Sheik is 2, Samus and Zero Suit Samus is 2, Pokemon Trainer is 3, and Miis are 3. Missing out on one down move is not a reason to count them as only one character. And just because they don't take up a physical slot on the screen doesn't mean they're two characters. They can always just shrink the screen and add another slot. It's not that difficult. Lastly, I'm going to count half clones, semi-clones, whatever you want to call them, as just clones, and I'm just going to refer to them as just clones. That's how Sakurai treats them. They're developed at the very end of the game. They're not even planned for the game itself. They just do it because they have extra time left, and it doesn't really affect the game-to-game statistics I'm bringing up anyway, so yeah, I'm just going to call them clones. Cuts! Now let's cut some characters. So let's look at some stats. And when I mean characters that were cut, I mean characters from one game that didn't move over to the next game. So Brawl, 4 characters were cut. That's 3 clones and 1 new, the clones being Dr. Mario, Pichu, and Roy, and the new one being Mewtwo. And for Smash 4, 6 characters were cut, 2 clones and 4 new. That's Wolf and Lucas as the clones, and for new/veterans was Ice Climbers, Squirtle, Ivysaur, and Snake. Now Smash 4 is a little bit different, because Ice Climbers were only cut because they had to factor in the 3DS this time, which was totally new for them, and they couldn't come in for hardware reasons. But they also tried to cram in Mewtwo, and they couldn't get him in as much as they wanted to. So even if they added Ice Climbers, regardless of the 3DS, I still think another character would have been cut in their place. I would still think they would count, or a spot would count there. And Snake is also different because he's a third party, so you can't always be sure that a third-party character is going to move to the next game because you're involving another company at this point. A number of reasons could be why they don't return. Either Sakurai doesn't feel they should return, or the company isn't interested, or, whatever reason. So here are some interesting tidbits about cut characters you may not know, excluding Ice Climbers and Snake because I just explain why there are exceptions to the rule. No series with only a single character to represent it has been cut before, and also no character that has been in 2 Smash games back-to-back has been cut. So basically any character that's appeared in Melee and Brawl hasn't been cut. Some examples being Bowser, Peach, Ganondorf, Young/Toon Link, Falco, Marth, and Game & Watch. I think that's all of them actually. So it'll be interesting to see if this rule holds up for characters that were introduced in Brawl and also came into Smash 4. So some examples being Diddy, Wario, Pit, Olimar, King Dedede, Meta Knight, Lucario, and Ike. However, even with this knowledge that no single character representing a franchise has been cut, or only characters introduced in the previous game have been cut, I'm still not exactly sure who will and won't get cut, but I do have a list of characters I think could get cut for various reasons, and I will actually cut some characters, because if you want to make a bet, you gotta stick to it. You gotta put yourself out there. So let's go through the list. First is Palutena, pro being she's kind of unique. I don't know, I don't really use her, I'll just say that. And the con being she's not really relevant, and the character has no future. I don't see Kid Icarus getting a new game. I would love to. Uprising was great, but I don't really see it happening, and there's no really reason to believe so at this point. And if they drop custom moves, they can just take her best ones. That was also one of her features, that she had different custom moves, but take the best ones. I mean, even if you bring back custom moves, please just give her the good ones, because the default ones she has kind of suck, to be honest. Everyone thinks that, actually. So the next one is Shulk. I know it sounds stupid, but give me a second at least. The pro being he's the only rep for the series, and he can change his stats, which is totally unique. No one else can really do that. The con being he could be replaced by another Xenoblade character. If Sakurai... He's still unique, but if Sakurai feels that the series only needs one character, he could potentially replace him, kind of like what Ike did for Roy. Now looking over it, I don't think it's likely, but that's a potential possibility we could be looking at. The next one is Dark Pit, which should be obvious. The pro being he's just a stronger Pit, and the con being obviously he's a clone and he's not really relevant. Same with Palutena. The next is Dr. Mario. The pro is he just returned. Why would we cut this character that we just brought back after, a decade or however long it's been now? And if Mario's moveset changes because of Odyssey, which probably won't happen, but if it does, he could be a representation for all of the old Mario moves, or at least some of them. Like, I don't think he would get the Flood or anything like that, but if Mario gets rid of the cape, then at least Dr. Mario has the cape for himself, that kind of thing. The con is obviously is a clone. The next is being Lucina. The pro is that she's actually really popular, even if she is a Marth clone, and the con being obviously she's a clone. And the last one is the Mii Brawler, Gunner, and Sword Fighter. The pro is you can be any character basically because you can, mess with their face and whatnot, and you have unique custom moves, so you can have a different moveset. But the con is that Miis aren't really relevant anymore. Just to make one, you have to go through like random settings on the Switch. I know they're adding Miis to like the browser or something, but really they're kind of dead. I mean, Miitomo just died today as I'm recording this. And if they cut out customization, that really hampers on the whole point of Mii fighters, is to make them customizable. And the interesting thing I noticed is that Miis don't even have their own symbol. The Tomodachi stage, I believe, has a symbol. The Wii Sports Resort stage has a symbol. All the stages relating to Miis have symbols, but the actual characters don't. It's just the Smash Brothers symbol, which is really weird. It's almost like you're not even a character, you're just some made thing we made up. Some character creator we made up. I don't know. It's not a real character. Just sit in the corner and cry to yourself. So that's the list as far as characters I think could get cut. I kind of think there might be more cuts than what I'm about to say. But then again, I thought Smash 4 was going to have to cut a lot from Brawl, and they didn't cut nothing. So I'm probably going to be wrong on that front. But I think Dark Pit, Dr. Mario, Mii Gunner, and Mii Swordsman are probably going to get cut. Yeah, I know. Easy choices that hurt like no one except for maybe Dr. Mario. But I don't think custom moves will return. That's a lot of work. What I think they should do is just consolidate the Miis. Rather than have 3 types of fighters, just have one actual character and base the moves off of actual games with Miis in them, because there's a lot to pull from and it would be a lot more authentic to the character. I know it's more of a custom character than like an actual named character, but still, there's a lot more moves that would actually be fitting, so I think they could just do that and cut the fat. Alright, now that we've thinned the herd, at least ever so slightly, let's organize this. Okay, so Fire Emblem might be a bit split, but I think it looks a lot better. Well, that's what I would have started from, but I didn't realize it would take 17 years to push tiles to a new row. But it also looked annoying, so we're going with this instead. The final result will look great, though. Characters! Now on to character additions. So there's going to be 4 main categories for characters: clones, retro, third party, and new. Let's break down the stats for overall characters introduced in each game. Remember, Zelda and Sheik are 2, Samus and Zero Suit Samus are 2, etc, etc. So Smash 64 introduced 12 characters, Melee introduced 14, that's 8 new and 6 clones, Brawl introduced 18, that's 16 new ones and 2 clones, and Smash 4 introduced 17, 15 being new and 2 clones. There are also 4 DLC new characters and 3 DLC veterans. And remember that 3 of the characters are Miis. Now here's my projection for Smash for Switch. It's going to have 16 characters, that's 13 new ones, 2 clones, and 1 veteran. Let's just get this out of the way. The 1 veteran is Ice Climbers. Hooray! Yeah, what a surprise. They don't have to worry about the 3DS hardware limitations anymore, so they should be back in. They won them in the first place. Clones! As for my 2 clones, let's look at some clone stats first. In 64 there was 1, being Luigi. In Melee there were 6, Dr. Mario, Falco, Pichu, Roy, Young Link, and Ganondorf. Brawl there were 2, Wolf and Lucas. And Smash 4 there were 2, Dark Pit and Lucina. Also, Lucas and Roy returned as DLC as veterans. Now, have you noticed something with these characters? Only one instance where a new series was introduced, they also got a clone. That was in Melee with Marth and Roy. So all of the clones for Melee and Brawl are based off of characters that appeared in the first game, except for Roy of course, and then Smash 4 has clones based off of characters from both Brawl and Melee. Jumping ahead a little, I don't see them cloning any third-party characters, for example, cloning Mega Man into Proto Man, or Sonic into Shadow, or Pac-Man into Miss and Junior Pac-Man. I think Sakurai respects these companies and characters too much to kind of half-ass their moveset and make them a clone. And even if he wanted to make them new characters, he'd likely just choose a character from another series from that company, because they have so many other series and better characters they could do than just another Sonic character or another Mega Man character. That's why we got Ryu from Capcom versus X or Zero from Mega Man. So my clones are only based on Nintendo characters, not third parties, but before making my choice, here's a list of potential clones I think we could see. To reiterate, with the exception of Roy, all clones are based off of franchises or characters that were introduced in a previous Smash game. My choices are Dixie based off of Diddy, Glass Joe based off of Little Mac, Medusa based off of Palutena, and Alf based off of Olimar. To quickly explain, Dixie was planned to team up with Diddy in Brawl but was dropped. Glass Joe is the only Punch-Out character with a similar build to Little Mac, albeit a little bit taller, and also the first boxer you face and easily recognizable, but he would be a joke character. That's a joke that he's really weak, and Sakurai has shied away from joke characters since Melee with Pichu, so that's probably not going to happen. Medusa seems unlikely given Kid Icarus as a franchise has no future, but you could pull a Ganondorf and make her stronger and heavier but have purple magic effects. And Elf was planned to be a clone with Rock Pikmin, but ended up becoming an alt instead. Depending on Pikmin 4, if and whenever that decides to come out, Elf could be irrelevant, or that new character becomes a clone and Elf stays as an alt for Olimar, or the new character could be a clone and bring back some of Olimar's old moves. I'm not sure how many are actually missing, but there's probably a couple besides his up B, I think. Despite that Dixie could be her own character with hair attacks, I think Dixie and Elf are likely candidates for clones. Next up, Retro! Let's break it down. In Melee there were 2, Ice Climbers and Mr. Game & Watch. In Brawl there were 2, Pit and Rob. And in Smash 4 there were 2, Little Mac and Duck Hunt. Each game has brought in 2 retro characters, and I don't think Smash for Switch will be any different. My first choice, oddly enough, isn't even one I agree with, but I'm kinda going with anyway. Takamaru. People think he's likely. I don't really think he's known well in the West enough. That was the reason he was cut in the first place, and a re-release on the eShop and a Nintendo Land minigame are definitely not enough to get people to notice him. I tried looking at other Nintendo accessories to base a rep off of, because that's what Mr. Game & Watch, Rob, and Duck Hunt are based off of, but I really couldn't find anything. There's no mascots for any other accessories I could find, and even looking back at some assist trophies, I don't think there's really any character that stands out, although I will sort of contradict myself in a minute. It is possible that Balloon Fighter makes it in as a tribute to Iwata, and he was sort of considered for Melee, but that's just wild speculation on my part. So, because I can't really think of any other options, I'm just going to choose Takamaru anyway. The only out there guess I could think of is Saki Amamiya from Sin and Punishment, who does have an assist trophy. Because he has a gun and sword, and Sakurai bought a mech figure with a gun, so maybe he could have used that to base his moveset off of. But he's not even from the 80s or the 90s, but the year 2000, so he's really too late to be considered a retro character. However, my other character is someone I'm confident will appear. I even made a moveset and a video explaining why I think he'll appear, both for Source Gaming. Excite Biker! So, he debuted in the 80s like the other retro characters, is known globally both on the NES Mini and the Famicom Mini, has a fair amount of games, has a course in Mario Kart 8 DLC and / Deluxe, which both sold millions of copies, and most importantly, he was one of Sakurai's choices as a retro character in Melee. Sakurai sort of listed that a ramp for a recovery might have been a problem, but Sonic, Mega Man, and Pac-Man have that all now, so it's really not a problem anymore. That was the only actual problem he listed compared to the other ones, which didn't really have much to work with in the first place. And since Ice Climbers are in, they're no longer competition for them like they were in Melee. Also, no other character in the game has a moveset based around a bike, and he's also more popular than Mach Rider, so as far as that goes, Mach Rider's out. Because of all of this, I think he's very likely to appear as a retro character. Some might say 75% likely. Also, there's very few other characters that I could see being retro reps that also fit Sakurai's criteria. Third party! I was going to go over all the third-party characters people are talking about, but it ended up being too long, and I think it's better served in another video anyway. Look for that in the next few days, it's already done. Now for third-party characters. There's a couple of different rules here that I mentioned earlier, but we'll go over them quickly now. For one, he's not going to open the floodgates for anyone and everyone. Both companies have to want the character in, and the character must carry game history. This last one isn't a rule, but it's still something to keep in mind. Sakurai sees Smash Bros. As a celebration for Japanese games, so he's probably going to be a bit more biased towards Japanese-made characters, although I think as long as they have worldwide appeal, they should be fine. We can't really tell how strict he is on characters made outside Japan, because all of the third-party characters he's chosen so far are popular everywhere. On to the stats. Brawl had 2 third-party characters, being Sonic and Snake, and Smash 4 also had 2, being Mega Man and Pac-Man. And then for DLC there were 2, Cloud and Bayonetta. I think we'll still only get 2 in the base game, and that they'll be from different companies, regardless of whether they have a rep already or not. So that could be Capcom and Square Enix, or whatever, just as long as it's not 2 from the same company like 2 new Capcom characters or 2 new Namco characters, etc. But I think at least one of them will be a new company that doesn't have a character in Smash Brothers already. This was both easy and difficult because there's so many great choices for third-party characters, but you're only really going to get 2 or maybe 3 slots in the base game. I think a lot of these could be DLC, but we're talking about the base game, so let's just limit it to that. So, after all of that, who have I chosen as my 2 third-party choices? Bomberman! Well, don't kill me for the first one, the second one's gonna be different. He's an iconic cartoony mascot that fits right in with Mario, Sonic, Mega Man, and Pac-Man. He has different types of bombs to trap people and could set up people for a combo. This point may or may not be relevant since he has a legacy, but I'll add it anyway. Both Nintendo and Konami came together to help make Super Bomberman R happen in the first place. And because Nintendo was involved, Sakurai might have known and might have influenced his choices. I could see Bomberman or Simon Belmont getting in, but people have been more vocal about Bomberman, so that's probably more likely. My other choice, however, is... Hero! A Dragon Quest character, specifically the hero from Dragon Quest VIII. The franchise has a long history, 30 plus years. Every main Dragon Quest game except for 10, the MMO, has made it to North America, and on a Nintendo console, mostly handhelds, so it's not a Japanese-only game, although of course it's more popular there. This is more subjective, but Dragon Quest VIII seems to be the Final Fantasy of the Dragon Quest world. As in, even outside viewers like myself will recognize Dragon Quest VIII characters as being from Dragon Quest VIII versus any other game. In 2010, Square Enix polled Japanese fans their favorite Dragon Quest games, and 8 came in second. First was 9, and 3 was third, funny enough. For reference, the poll was taken around a year and a half after Dragon Quest IX came out, so it's still fairly new, so that's probably why it came in first. Also, given Dragon Quest 7 and 8 got remakes on the 3DS, it's probably safer to choose 8's hero over 3's, despite 3's hero being tied to the first 2 games. 8's hero is also visually more distinct compared to 3's, which looks just like a typical knight. I'm not Japanese, so it's possible 3's hero is more important than them. I'm just a schmuck, cut me some slack. He does have a sword, but he's also an RPG character, so he has spears, boomerangs, and magic. Also, he has a pig rat. I'd like to see you do better, Erdrick. For his final smash, he could use super high tension, which is basically Super Saiyan mode, mixed with some random high level attack. Nintendo! Last but not least, the Nintendo characters. Unlike statistics for other sections, I don't think there's really a pattern you can count on here, at least in the same sense. Just because a franchise has gotten a character before doesn't mean they will again, so there's not a repeatable pattern you can follow. Although Mario, Fire Emblem, and Pokemon are pretty much series you can count on for new reps. Mario is obviously the face of Nintendo, and the other 2 have rotating casts. However, I do have some statistics that might shed some light, and that's on the franchises. So for how many new franchises were introduced in each game, Melee has 3, that's Ice Climbers, Fire Emblem, and Game & Watch. Brawl has 4 to 6, Wario, Pikmin, Kid Icarus, and Rob, and the other 2 being third parties, Metal Gear Solid and Sonic, so you can count that if you want or not because it's a separate case. And Smash 4 is 6 and 8, which is Duck Hunt, Punch-Out!, Mii, Xenoblade, Animal Crossing, Wii Fit Trainer, and the other 2 are also third parties, Mega Man and Pac-Man. With DLC being 3, Bayonetta, Final Fantasy, and Street Fighter. For Switch, I think it's going to be like Smash 4, so 6 and 8 franchises, and you'll find out which ones they are as we go through this list. I'm going to add characters based on the way I've ordered the roster. First though, Inklings are already confirmed, so let's move on from them. Another thing, I don't think we're going to get any ARMS or Ever Oasis characters. They're simply too new, and they didn't even really know if they were going to be hits back when they were making Smash. So if they added a character and the game flopped, like Codename Steam for example, it would be pretty embarrassing to have a character in there that people either don't know or don't really care about. The first character I'm going to add... Captain Toad! Originally, I actually thought he wouldn't have been around long enough for him to make any sense, but when I look back at Rosalina, she only had 4 appearances, Galaxy 1 and 2, and Mario Kart Wii and Mario Kart 7. And by the time Smash started, Captain Toad will have been in Galaxy 1 and 2, 3D World, and his own game, Treasure Tracker, and maybe Odyssey depending on the timing. He may not have been inducted into the spin-offs yet, and wasn't nearly as important to Galaxy as Rosalina, but having his own game does put him at the forefront, especially past some other Mario characters people are wanting to come in that I don't think are gonna happen. Shots fired. Anyway, I think designing a character that can't jump, which is something other characters can't do, sounds like a mechanic Sakurai would find interesting to work around. That means you could either, I don't know, throw around your bag like an item, like Wario's bike, so other people can pick it up, so there's this risk-reward attachment to it, or I think Game Explain threw out the idea of throwing out projectiles from the bag and your bag gets lighter, and you can move around more easily, or actually jump when you empty your bag, but then your hits aren't as strong. Something like that. There's a cool mechanic to be had in there. It's a way to bring in a classic Mario character, but in a way that actually isn't boring. Next, a lot of people think we're going to get another Zelda character, and I don't really think that's going to happen, unless the Breath of the Wild Link is a third separate Link, which I mean could work on his own, but that'd be kind of annoying to see 3 Links. Both main characters and villains are one-off characters, and while it would be cool if the seat rotated, it wouldn't really make any sense. A lot of people are saying Impa because she's the only other recurring character, and I agree on that part, but I still don't see her happening. For one, people want the Hyrule Warriors version with a sword, and while Enuma worked on it, it's still not a canon game, and Sakurai sticks to the original incarnations. Second, if you're not going to go with the Hyrule Warriors version of Impa, then which one do you choose? There's consistent characteristics, sure, but you have both young and old, and several versions of each of them. Plus, there's no young Impa in Breath of the Wild or Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword wouldn't be consistent because all the other characters are usually based around one game. Although, with Breath of the Wild Link, maybe they're going to do something different where Link and Zelda will be from Breath of the Wild, Ganondorf will be from Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker Link will obviously be from Wind Waker. So maybe they could have Impa as the Skyward Sword version, and they're just going to represent all the different types of franchises. I have no idea. That's the only way I could see it really working, because otherwise it's just going to be a mess. And lastly, especially if you're not going with the Hyrule Warriors version of Impa, how would she play? From what I recall, she doesn't use any weapons in the canon games, and the only time she fights is to defend Zelda and Skyward Sword with magic. Overall, Impa is a Sheikah, and Sheik already plays like a Sheikah, so I can't honestly see her be anything but a Sheik clone. And for that reason, I don't really think we're going to get Impa or even another Zelda character. Next up, King K. Rool. I think it's a similar situation with the Inklings, where they have a Mii costume and it shows they're aware of fan demand, but they'd be better served promoting a new game than just DLC for an old game. And I think for DLC characters, you have to choose characters that are really popular, because now you have to get people to buy extra content, and I don't think King K. Rool has that much of a pull, especially compared to third-party characters, but if you put him in the base game, he'll still get people hyped up, and that'll be enough. That's about as best he can do. Decidueye! So originally I thought it was going to be a Gen 8 Pokemon, and this was assuming that the Pokemon game on Switch coming in 2018 was going to be Generation 8, but with all these rumors about a Pokemon Yellow remakes, and it's basically confirmed with just how much there's going on and how much of it makes sense, that's out the window now. So now I'm going back to Decidueye, because that makes the most sense. Statistically, 4 out of 9 Pokemon in Smash are starters, chosen based on the game. The other 4 are chosen based on the anime and movies. Pichu is the one outlier because Sakurai wants something to pick on. I did a Rate That Character video on Decidueye for Source Gaming's channel, which goes into a bit more detail, but I'll go over quickly some of the other possible Pokemon people are looking at, as well as some details I wasn't able to include in that video. With Mimikyu, Sakurai couldn't have known if he was going to be popular or not, and the show and games wouldn't release until several months later. Likewise, Lycanroc's Dusk form wouldn't even come out until Ultra Sun and Moon a year later, and if that's the case, Sakurai wouldn't have any other reason to focus on Lycanroc, so that pretty much counts him out. Out of the Alolan starters, Incineroar and Primarina already have their types represented. Charizard is Fire, Greninja is Water and Dark, and Jigglypuff is Fairy, even if she doesn't have any Fairy moves. Decidueye, however, is both Grass and Ghost, and Grass hasn't been playable since Ivysaur left, and Ghost is completely new to Smash. So I'm assuming Ivysaur won't return, which means he would have 2 types that aren't currently represented in Smash still. There's also no Pokemon headlining movies in the last couple of years that I think would work, Hoopa and Deontay would probably be better as Pokeball Pokemon, and Volcanion could technically work, but no one cares about him at this point. I don't think any of those movie Pokemon have hit it big like Lucario or Mewtwo, so Decidueye is pretty much the only option. So Smash 4 came out and had Greninja playable, and then a year later, Pokken came out and had most of the Smash 4 Pokemon, except for Greninja and Jigglypuff. But Jigglypuff's no longer relevant, they can have another Joe character, it's fine, they got Chandelure. So I'm thinking maybe the Pokemon Company wanted to be different and not have all of the Smash 4 Pokemon come over, so they did something different and cut out Greninja. But now, it's the opposite, where Pokken DX is coming out with Decidueye, and a year after that, Smash for Switch is coming out. So maybe Sakurai will also feel the same, and rather than also putting in, the biggest new starter Pokemon, he's going to do something else just so Smash for Switch feels a little bit more different, even if they share most of the characters. And in that case, I would probably give the edge to Mimikyu. Mimikyu has this interesting backstory where, depending on, I forget the game or the show, it love or hates Pikachu and is dressing up because it wants to just be loved and popular like Pikachu. And it's a ghost type, which isn't in Smash, so it has those things going for it that make it interesting. So if it's not Decidueye, I think it's Mimikyu, but it's probably going to be Decidueye. Next up, Fire Emblem. Because it's a huge series now, it makes sense to hold a spot, and I don't think we're going to get a Smash Brothers game and not have a new Fire Emblem character because how much it's blown up since then. So expect another one. But even though Sakurai has said he does think there's too many Fire Emblem characters in the game, that's including the DLC characters, and if we're cutting those like I think they might be, then you might be adding one character, but you're still losing one, so it'd be 5 versus 6. So I don't think that's too bad compared to some of the other series. Hopefully this time the main character uses something other than a sword, maybe an axe or something, throw us a bone, just so we can have something different. So Fire Emblem for Switch started roughly 6 to 8 months before Smash likely started, and releases around the same time, so I think it would be a really missed opportunity to throw in an old character like Lyn or another Fates character than to have, the new character of the newest game that's coming out within a month of release. So I don't think you're going to get a fan favorite character like Lyn because she still uses just a sword, and we couldn't even get Chrom because Sakurai felt he still felt like somewhere between Marth and Ike and just wasn't enough of his own, and that's why Lucini wasn't even a new character, she was a clone. So I think he's pretty much done with just sword Fire Emblem characters unless it's a new protagonist. Even with Corrin, she had a chainsaw sword and was, part dragon, so there's still something new to work off of there versus just I'm a character and I have a sword, except I don't have blue hair. So I think Fire Emblem characters are done unless it's a protagonist or someone like Hector or someone with a different weapon becomes the new fan favorite character for quite some time. Next, Kirby. You can pretty much just copy and paste the problem I have with Zelda with Kirby. There's just too many one-off characters. People are saying Bandanity, but he's just a standard enemy with a bandana. That's not really special. He's just the 4th character thrown in there just so they have 4-player. The difference between him, Meta Knight, and King Dedede is that those two actually have personality and an involvement in the story. Bandanity has none of that. It'd be the same as adding a Toad or a Koopa Troopa. At least Captain Toad is a specific character with an importance, and he even has his own game for crying out loud. Next up, Elma. By the time Sakurai started Smash, Xenoblade 2 is already halfway through development. It started in July 2016, the developer said themselves. Fire Emblem and Pokemon are really the only series he can hold a spot for a new character because he knows they'll offer something new and because, they're hugely popular. He wouldn't have known Xenoblade 2 would have been popular, so you can't really go off of that. Given Xenoblade isn't a huge series, he's not going to hold off until the new game is far enough so that he can make a character off it. Just like every other franchise, except for, Fire Emblem or Pokemon, he's just going to go and look at the past and pull a character from that. I'm going to go with Nintendex's expertise on a Xenoblade character because I haven't played the series, so I'm stealing from this, I'm sorry. Also, thank you. He points to Sakurai buying a mech holding a gun and estimating that Elma is really the only character it would apply to, unless he's doing custom Robo, which I kinda doubt, which was already an assist trophy, unless it's based on another assist trophy, which I kinda doubt he would buy a model just for that. Okay, this is a section where I might lose some people, but we're pretty much done, so I gotcha. Not all of the characters are obvious. No one really would have predicted Pokemon Trainer or Wii Fit Trainer or maybe even Shulk. So you're gonna have to make some guesses when you're trying to predict the roster because not everything's gonna be blatantly obvious. So let's start up with the first one. Chibi Robo! We gotta fill up the roster somehow, and they can't all be Fire Emblem characters. You got your own game, leave us alone! Jeez. When it comes to your choice of dead franchises like Custom Robo, Advance Wars, and Golden Sun, Chibi Robo was still being covered in dirt by the time Sakurai was making a roster, so he might still have a chance. He wasn't the highest on fan polls, though most characters that are even on official polls don't even get in, but he was consistent enough, and it's a Nintendo character that stars in his own games. Plus, if I'm including someone like the hero from Dragon Quest, it would be redundant to have Isaac as well, who's also not as popular as a Dragon Quest character. I can't really think of a unique mechanic for old Chibi because Villager already stole his pocket move, but he's got charm and he's got his knickknacks and doodads and will at least certainly weird people out, so I think he's still worth a shot. Next up, Tibby! There was data in Smash 4 suggesting a rhythm having character, and there was a whole Gamatsu leak, and they keep making games in the series and it hasn't been declared dead yet, so it's not that outrageous. There's not a whole lot of Nintendo franchises left that are still going that haven't been put into Smash, so it seems almost inevitable to me. Out of all the rhythm having characters, it makes sense to attach moves from all sort of minigames to an unrelated and kind of generic character, because then you wouldn't have Karate Joe using a golf club or tap dancing or spinning on an office chair. It wouldn't really make sense. Kind of break the character. And also, compared to Chorus Kids, Tibby is actually like a protagonist in the game with a story, versus Chorus Kids, which are basically just, I think, the first minigame in most of the games and appears on the box art. So, I mean, they are recognizable, but they also don't carry any weight in the games. They're not any more special than any other character. Also, as a side note, Tibby actually has, like, color to him compared to the Chorus Kids, which are just white with a black outline. I don't think they would stand out that well, so that kind of gives a point towards Tibby. I know I just mentioned Chibi Robo, but I think gray stands out better than white anyway. And the final character is... Dillon! In the early days of the 3DS, Nintendo published some new IP for the 3DS eShop, including Sakura Samurai, Pushmo, Dillon's Rolling Western, and later on Harmonite and Rusty's Real Deal Baseball. Only half of them actually got a sequel, being Pushmo, Dillon, and Box Boy. Although they did all get honorary trophies in Smash, except Box Boy, which released after Smash came out. Of them, only Dillon actually got a spot as an assist trophy, even though I think Pushmo got more public attention. So, where are they all now? Well, Box Boy's confirmed done with the third game, and Pushmo seems to be done. It was made almost a yearly franchise, but hasn't had a game since 2015, and now Dillon is still rolling. Through an apocalypse. No, that's literally the third game, he's in an apocalypse. To be fair, it's probably easier to include him as an assist trophy than the other characters, but I also think it's because he has a very distinct design and personality, at least through body language. I don't know if you could really include the tower defense elements, maybe someone shoots something off screen like the Duck Hunt smash moves, but being an armadillo and having an Old West themed character would add some flavor to his moveset and the roster. The third game probably would have been too early to influence his moveset, which is unfortunate because he has a cool jacket, but the fact that they're making a third game could indicate to Sakurai that he has some staying power. And even if the other games did get third entries, Dillon seems like the only one that can actually go somewhere else with it, and the developers want to do something new with it. I mean, they went from an old western to a Mad Max kind of setting. What the heck? They clearly want to do some different stuff with this, versus Pushmo and Box Boy, which I think they've pretty much done everything they've wanted to or can do with it. For what it's worth, they have said they would like to make a game on Switch, so there's that. And also a funny tidbit that really has nothing to do with anything. The director of these games has also directed the Tingle games, so that kind of shows what kind of crazy people we have working on these. And that was the final character. So, let's recap some stats and how my version of Smash for Switch compares to the rest of the series. We've cut 4 characters like Brawl, added 2 clones like Brawl and Smash 4, returned 1 veteran, called up 2 third parties like Brawl and Smash 4, added 11 Nintendo characters close to Smash 64's original 12, and collected 6 to 8 new franchises like Smash 4. And that's my educated guess on the roster. Most people just go for, what characters they want or think need to be in, but no one really tries to make a prediction based on consistent patterns or timeline development or even Sakurai's own criteria, so I want to offer that perspective. And hopefully you got something out of watching this. By the way, thanks for watching. I think this is like half an hour at this point, or at least I hope it's not any longer. Here's hoping I'm right, because I have a bet riding on it.